I always wonder, like, people watching this, and like, which square do I look at? Where do I look? Where do I go? So welcome everyone. I'm one of the co-hosts, Mohawk Matt Denny. We've also got another co-host, Ed Parcaut, and I'm going to slaughter your name every time. In about 10 years, I'll get it right.
Amy T. Meyer.
Amy T. Meyer. I want to say Ty Meyer. We know each other pretty well, but I'm not great at it. But most importantly, today we've got our special guest, Jocelyn Stewart. How's it going, Jocelyn?
Well, it's going really well today. Thank you.
No, we appreciate you coming on. We really do. Yes.
I appreciate you having me.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah. We love people, and we love veterans, and we love people to help veterans. So, and you're a veteran that helps veterans. So you're like a triple win today.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So yeah, Amy, how are you doing over there?
I'm doing pretty good, keeping it down. Also in the same area of Joint Base Lewis McChord.
Very cool. Where is that for the rest of us that don't know Army things?
Tacoma, Washington.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, we're excited to be here. Ed, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying you're on Wi-Fi, aren't you?
Me? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking. You're breaking up a little bit.
I'm in a hotel, so.
Right. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to Jocelyn. You want to tell us your story? What service did you join? Was there how did you pick it? That kind of thing.
So when I was in high school, a woman came to my school, this tiny little Episcopal school in Cade, Louisiana, and she was a cadet at the time at West Point. And she gave us a spiel about her education and being an athlete. Listening to all of it, honestly, it sounded exactly like what I was looking for. It was an opportunity to really challenge myself in all facets of kind of how I saw myself as an athlete, also discipline, academically. And I kind of declared to my whole class that day, I'm going to West Point. And I did. A lot of people laughed, kind of said, okay, she's crazy. But ultimately, I ended up applying to West Point, and I also applied to Annapolis. I was accepted to both and decided to go the West Point route. I think maybe better advertising or something. Someone had said to me once, if you want to lead people, go to West Point. And if you want to lead systems, if you want to understand systems and how they work, go to Annapolis. I'm a people person, and so it really, I don't know how much truth, obviously, there was in that since I didn't go to Annapolis, but it was what led me to the Army, specifically was West Point. I actually ended up getting sick pretty early on to my time there. I lost a bunch of weight, was kind of in and out of the hospital, and so I was medically separated. So I have also the advantage of understanding, kind of where veterans come from when they encounter medical issues, having gone through that process. So eventually I kind of fought back to get back in. I was awarded an ROTC scholarship in my undergrad in this little tiny school, honors college in Louisiana, in Natchitoches, Louisiana. If you've ever seen Steel Magnolias, that's the town where it was filmed. Just kind of a very quintessential little Southern town. But I reapplied to West Point. I was really, really set on going back. After 2 years in undergrad, I was given the chance to go back and ultimately decided not to. I was already going to commission through ROTC and had 2 years of undergrad under my belt, which I would have had to scrap because West Point doesn't take any transfer hours. So essentially would have been 2 years of zero gain when it came to academics. So that's kind of what at least led me to the Army. Eventually, I asked for an educational delay because I really always saw myself as an attorney. Actually, from the time I was 5, I always wanted to do that. So I
got a question.
Sure.
Sorry, I don't want you talking the whole time, and that's not all standing over here.
I can do that. You got to cut me off.
So why at 5? There has to be a story here of the 5. Why at 5 you knew you wanted to be an attorney? There has to be.
Well, and to be fair, like the better asterisk on that is that I really wanted to be a judge. So I was the kid in kindergarten who's like listening to the drama and deciding what the fair, arbitration needed to be. In kindergarten, I was doing this. So it just felt like the right role. And so when I was 5, I told my dad, I remember telling him, hey, I'm going to be a judge. And he said, well, to be a judge, you have to go to law school first. I'm like, no, you don't. I wasn't convinced. And he said, no, with some evidence that he gave me, he made his case. And I said, okay, fine. I'll go be a lawyer first, but then, I'm headed to become a judge.
So is that still your plan? Long
It
term?
was for a really long time. I was, I put in an application to become a military judge in my reserve capacity. And recently it didn't work out, but I still see it as a blessing. I know that the role that I'm playing on behalf of service members now may not be aligned with where everyone are the decision makers can envision me being, and I'm okay with it. That definitely hurt. It definitely stung for sure. But I know that the path that I'm on is the path where I really am meant to be.
Matt, do you have any questions? I know you're still Googling steel magnolias to know what that was.
Can I date myself, actually? Yikes.
No, I'm just waiting for him to admit it.
No, I know it. I've never seen it, but I know what it is.
All right, just checking.
No man generally is going to admit that he's seen it, right? I mean,
I have never seen that movie. I've seen the previews, I've seen the clips for it, but I've never watched the actual movie. That's okay.
It stands up. It stands
I
up.
have no problem watching those type of movies. It's just not that one. So, yeah. All right. You guys have any questions, or I'm just going to keep going?
Just one thing. As we are live, we got a number of folks with us, so this is also for you guys to ask questions as you have them. Obviously, we'll keep the conversation going, but if you have them for Jocelyn, go ahead. If Jocelyn, you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
And welcome Jacqueline, who's here, and all the others that are watching with us. So back to you, Jocelyn, for your story.
Yeah. All right. So I cut you off when it was age 5. You were telling your story about you wanted to be an attorney, that whole thing. So go ahead.
Right. So when I was doing my undergrad and on the ROTC path, I found out that I could ask for an educational delay so that I could take a timeout, pay for it myself, but then serve my obligation under my contract as a JAG instead of in any other branch that I might have, been, received upon commissioning. So I applied and, talk about being discouraged. I remember there was a woman from ROTC Cadet Command who came to visit, and I think they were really just trying to push to commission folks. And so when she found out I wanted an educational delay, she told me not to bother applying. She said, "You'll never get it." Those tend to be the greatest motivations for me, right? When someone tells you that you can't do something. And I just remember thinking, you don't even know me. You don't know anything about me. I graduated first in my class. An undergrad and distinguished military graduate. I mean, there kind of wasn't anything that I didn't set out to do that I wasn't going to do. I was rowing crew for college also, getting up every day at 5 and putting in those long hours. So I didn't let it discourage me. I'm really glad that I didn't, because I was granted the educational delay and got the chance to go to law school before I served my time.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. I think you're right. I think those are the greatest moments when we can overcome different challenges. I was denied being able to go to college by a university, or said that they didn't believe there was any reason that I could show that I would be successful as a student. And so I asked the administrative person kind of the same thing, like, well, what's the appeals process? And she goes, I don't know. I've never done it. And I said, well, I need you to find out, because I'm going to go through the appeals process. And now I have my master's. Exactly. And I did it working full time with 3 kids, the whole 9 yards. And so I agree. I think that's a wonderful part of your story. Thank you for sharing.
No, thank you. And I'm glad that you fought your way through what you needed to. I mean, I did. I remember being at ROTC Advanced Camp, actually in Fort Lewis, right? Joint Base Lewis McChord. And we had very few opportunities to get on the phone, but I took one of my opportunities to call in and get my LSAT score, right? The score that was going to decide, am I going to get to do what I've always longed to do? And I bombed it. I mean, I bombed that exam. I did horribly. It was like the first time kind of, that I hadn't aced something, and it was humbling, and it was really important to my story too. But I remember standing there in line, because the training was not grueling, right? Like, let's just be honest. I made it through like the equivalent of like a weird basic hazing kind of training at West Point, right? And that was, ROTC was a walk in the cake as far as I was concerned. And so I'm on the phone and I'm very emotional. I just learning that I bombed this test and really questioning, am I going to get to go to law school? And somebody behind me was like, it's going to be okay. We're going to finish soon. We're going to get through the training, and being like, whoa, we're just in different places, right? Like I'm, to them, I think it looked like I was cracking under the pressure of this training, and me, I'm like, am I going to get to go to law school or not? But thankfully I worked out. I went to LSU, go Tigers. I'm a big LSU fan, season ticket holder all 3 years. And I missed that. I haven't been home in a really long time, but I really missed the culture and the food, although I do recreate most of it here in Western Washington.
All right. So you graduated and then you were in the service for how long?
Almost 9 years. Yeah. So I had a period of time after finishing law school and taking the bar before I could report for JAG OBC, which at the time was taking place in 2 separate locations of Virginia, initially at Fort Lee, and then for the academic part in Charlottesville, Virginia on UVA's campus. So I trained for a marathon. What else do you do when you're hanging around and you can't find a job? Because nobody wants to hire you because they know that you have a job, right?
You're such a slacker, I tell you.
I try. So
you need start time. I don't know. I just run marathons. What the heck?
Not anymore. My body hasn't held up to it, but it was something that was important for me, just to kind of prove to myself that I could do, I think. So then I reported to OBC, and I finished that out, and I was really, really fortunate to get an assignment overseas. So I was stationed in Germany for 2 consecutive tours, which was great. It was amazing to be there. Not only the legal issues that I ended up falling into and some of the great cases that I had a chance to be a part of, but also just anytime we did take time off, right, to travel, just the proximity to all the history and to see so many different things in different cultures was great.
Looks like Matt had to step away. Anyway, first he had to take a phone call. I think they probably called him in. So back to your story. All right, when you got out, how was your transitioning as an officer getting out? Did you know you were an attorney, right? You're going to be did you know exactly when you were getting out what you're going to do going forward?
I did. It was hard. I did kind of I think I would say the usual thing that a lot of JAGs do when they transition off active duty, and you put your feelers into federal jobs. I had prosecuted for a number of years, and I felt like I was best suited maybe to work for the Department of Justice somewhere. And so I applied for a lot of DOJ type jobs, and I was getting some feelers back, and I really kind of sat back and said, the places that you're getting these opportunities to try to do this work are not places that you want to be in, certainly not places that I wanted to raise my family. By that point, I had 3 kids. And I didn't want to be raising them in a borough of New York or, New Jersey. It just wasn't, they weren't places that were drawing me to it and saying, okay, where do I feel best drawn? Where do I feel suited to the work? And where do I feel compelled to try to move? And so I reached out to a colleague of mine who I actually had gone up against, great man, Mike Waddington, just super, super great guy. A fellow veteran from the Army who had started a civilian law practice. And I was kind of tossing around the idea of maybe trying to do similar work. And so I reached out to Mike and I just said, hey, if I hang a shingle, am I going to survive? Am I going to be able to do this work and to make it as a living? And he was so gracious and kind of gave me my start and said, hey, have I got a deal for you? And so he brought me on to be an of counsel to his firm. So that essentially he was feeding me leads on casework that I could do and veterans and, active duty folks that I could try to help. And so I did that for a year while simultaneously trying to build my own independent practice, doing the same thing, but developing that as well. And then after 1 year, I transitioned into doing all of the work on my own. And at each step, it really was create a lot of anxiety, right? Like the idea, I think for a lot of veterans, especially, and even when I talk to attorneys now who I may be recruiting to come on to do this work with me, it's a huge transition for us when we are accustomed to that comfort of the 1st and the 15th, right? We know that check is coming. It's there. It's guaranteed. And when you take the leap into something like a private practice where you really are taking that gamble, it can be very unsettling. I tried to explain it I think, that feeling when you kind of get to the top of a roller coaster just before like you're going to go over the edge, and that feeling in your stomach, I felt like that for 2 years at least. Just, that, okay, I'm putting in the work, I'm doing all of these things, but is it going to matter? Right. I think I had a very naive kind of mindset that if I worked the hardest at whatever I did, that I'd get clients. Right. And that's not always the reality. A lot of it is marketing. A lot of it is making sure that your face is out there, that people know the solid work that you do, so that then you can continue to be in a place to be able to have those folks come on and so you can help them. But it was tough, definitely a tough transition. But I felt really lucky that I had people who were willing to take a chance on me.
And my question is, we're all veterans here, but why the veterans? Is there, it seems like such a niche for your part of the law to be in that is unique for me. I didn't know there was enough for, of things that could happen for vets that you be able to do that. I'm trying to get this question out, but basically I'm unaware that there was that much to do for attorney to be able to specialize in helping vets.
Right. And well, thank you for asking that, because actually that is a really big part of why I did my practice. The last job that I had on active duty, I think gave me a very different insight into kind of, if you will, the pendulum that was swinging. Right. So as a prosecutor early on, I'd say, and even leading up to about, 2010 timeframe, like we really were on some levels, and for some people, battling the idea that which cases should be going forward. And specifically, I'm talking about sexual assault, right? I mean, it's a hot topic in the military. It's a hot topic for Congress, for people to understand kind of where that was. And I definitely lived through and served at a time when we really needed to reemphasize it, right? We really needed to make sure that it was receiving its appropriate attention. But I also was there when the pendulum was swinging back the other way, and when I saw cases that really had no place going forward, that were going forward no matter what, without regard to merit, without regard to the evidence, simply because that was the political leaning at the time. And so it meant a lot to me to say, okay, somebody needs to be putting the foot on the brakes, right? If I can't do it within the system, I'm going to have to do it outside the system to be able to confront it and make sure that service members and veterans are going to be getting the appropriate and really hard charging defense that's required when you're talking about those kinds of allegations and the kind of stakes that are really at play.
Any questions, Amy? Or am I doing the whole interview?
Well, it's funny because
you're great. I want to interact and make sure that I'm not leaving. So I run another podcast radio show, so I sometimes take over, not meaning to. So I want to make sure I'm inclusive. Let's use that word today. Like everywhere, making sure everybody gets their words in. So I'm just really stuck on this because I think that's, I applaud you, whatever, that you're doing this work, because it takes a lot out of somebody to put their time and effort into helping vets like this and do this type of work. So
well, thank you. Yeah, it means a lot to me. It really does. I've seen, there's an example of a case, I always prided myself when I was prosecuting that maybe it was the bosses I worked for, maybe it was the experience that I brought to it, but I was able to stop cases that I really didn't feel like should be going forward. And there was one case in particular that stands out for me at Fort Riley. I did a very compelling, interview of a woman who had come forward and claimed that her spouse had assaulted her. And I was, she was very compelling. I definitely felt like it was a case that was worthy of going forward. But as with all cases, I said, okay, let's pause. Let's not be, swept up by the emotion, and let's really dig in. And because I built every case brick by brick. I think that that's the most effective way, not only to prosecute, but also if you're going to be facing the other side, to be dismantling it, right? And so as I dug in, I realized that the gentleman she was accusing had an absolute ironclad 100%, which is like never, right? Alibi. There was zero chance that he had done this. Zero. it knocked me on my tail because I was ready to, have a commander swear to charges. I think I had to take at least a day off of work because I was that sidelined, because I always feel pretty good about my intuition, pretty good about my level of empathy. And I felt like I'd been taken. But I felt good about the fact that I, presented this evidence to the decision makers, and they ultimately decided not to go forward. So fast forward maybe 9-10 months later, I'm a civilian. I'm a civilian defense counsel. I'm going back to Fort Riley because now I've been hired on to defend a premeditated murder case there. One of my colleagues who was in the field was defending a separate case at Fort Riley, and he pulled me aside, and it was the case that I had stopped from going forward. I said, "What do you mean? How could this be? He has an alibi." He said, "Well, I know that." I said, "Well, did the prosecutors make that disclosure to you?" He said, "No." And it was really unsettling for me. Not only that this case that I had uncovered, obviously exculpatory evidence to stop from going forward, was now being taken forward from other folks who just didn't necessarily have the perspective that I did. And I was grateful to have such an esteemed colleague who was taking up his defense, and the case turned out what I believe is the right way. But it was really eye-opening that this was the direction that things have been heading, and kind of have been heading ever since.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, until you get in, that you're guilty and still proven innocent in the military. It's all a complete opposite. Well, kind of like today in courts, right? We're completely guilty.
That's exactly true. And it's amazing, even as I talk to people and, kind of, they don't even know that that's a bias that they have until they're in it, until maybe their lives are touched by it because somebody that they know has been accused. And all of a sudden they say, well, gosh, maybe this person really didn't do this thing that they're alleged. I think there is a common misconception, what I'm constantly trying to preach about, is that there's this idea that there's a dichotomy between either this person who's come forward is 100% factually accurate and truthful, versus they're coming forward and they're intending to mislead or lie. And I think that there's a huge chasm of cases in between, that it's not that. A lot of times alcohol is at play, recollections aren't best, right? And there's a fervent belief that a crime was committed, and maybe there wasn't, right? And so I feel like much of the work that I've been able to do has been to spotlight that and to highlight that an allegation does not necessarily mean that we've gone to the right conclusion, right? And so many people tend to kind of jump there.
Anything, Amy?
Well, okay. So
you had that look on their face.
I hear what you have to say. I guess I think it can be frightening for people to come forward anyhow sometimes, right?
Sure.
And like you had talked about military sexual trauma and it having the right amount of voice and precedence and different things like that. And so this topic, to me, we could talk for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days, because it is so hard to try to get the people who are really being hurt to come forward and not have preconceived notions or different narratives, and to be able to know what a narrative is and a counter narrative, and that both of them can be almost just as true.
Absolutely.
Because perspectives are, and that's hard work, I think, to do. Like what do you do to keep yourself balanced?
That's thank you for asking that. And thank you for your, what you're sharing. Like, so I do want to make it clear that it's this, in addition to this work being hard, and I'm definitely going to answer your question. I probably sound like a politician, but there are so many different and compelling issues at play. Like I had a recent opportunity to be able to address more senior leadership about kind of where I think some of the changes need to be made so that we are, and I say we, because I still feel very much a part of the military, that we are encouraging and ensuring that we are taking care of people who are being traumatized. And also, but not creating incentive, right, to be able to incentivize people who are maybe making that and coming forward for different reasons other than truly to share their experiences. But in terms of what I do, I don't know that I do enough, right? To be honest, I write a lot on my blog post about vicarious trauma. It's very real, right? For anybody who is, I consider us very much to be frontline, first responders to that kind of a trauma, because for the person being accused, they also are being traumatized. But even the advocates, right? I keep close tabs on the attorneys who are doing this work around me and with me, because when we hear an experience either from an alleged victim or from our client, if you have and feel deep empathy, that can literally be triggering for you and be traumatic for you to live through their experience. Studies have indicated, and even the American Bar Association has put out a lot of literature about how we need to be very vigilant as attorneys who are doing all of that. So the first thing that I'm going to share with you, and even in 2021, I think there's a stigma, but I think it's important that we try to dispel it. I'm in therapy. Right? I talk to somebody every other week because it's important, because I know that in order for me to keep doing this work, to be at my best for others, I need to make sure that I have my head on right? That I am taking care of myself. And so I'm in therapy. So there you go. I do that. I also practice yoga, which I've come to later in life. Like, my life used to just be about, I'm going on a run, right? I'm gonna zone out. I'm gonna kind of meditate. I've written a lot of closing arguments and a lot of jury questions over a nice long run, right? I write it in my head, come back, get it out on paper. My joints, and having had 4 babies in a pretty close order amount of time, is not allowed me to run so much. So yoga is a big part of my day. It's actually how I start my day. I used to pick up my phone and start checking email, right? Getting the texts, because I had clients all over the globe. And so there's messages that are always going to be there, right? Whether it's, 2 a.m. and it's coming in from Japan or what have you. But I don't do that anymore. My phone I don't look at it, at least until I've done my time with my yoga and I set an intention for the day. The first intention that I have to always set is that I'm entitled to this time, because time is such a precious commodity, right? And I want to always be putting my energy into the things that mean the most to me, instead of reacting, right? So I set that intention in yoga to say, okay, what are the things that I'm, first and foremost, like, I'm here and I'm present in this moment, and I'm entitled to this time. I deserve this time so that I can rejuvenate, so that I can also be at my best. I've also taken on to setting pretty significant boundaries with my clients, which is hard, right? Because they're going through such difficult states that, there's a reason I think that they call attorneys counselors, right? Counselor at law. But we can sometimes blur that line between being their advocate and being too connected to them as what a mental health, specialist should be doing. And so I am reframing constantly. Again, see, can't you tell I've been in therapy? I've got all this good therapy talk. Reframing and setting appropriate boundaries so that I am doing what I need to for them, still showing caring, still showing empathy, but also not blurring that line and making sure that they are getting the appropriate behavioral health attention that they need, and being vulnerable by sharing with them my story, right? That I'm in therapy, that it's something that I do. I have anxiety, I have PTSD. I've got a number of experiences that I think can help me align them with my clients so that they can understand, like, okay, she shared this with me, then maybe it's okay, right? Maybe it's okay for me to get that help. But the answer is probably not enough, right? So I'm constantly, I think it's like anything, just like the practice of law, just like we're all practicing to be at our best selves, that I'm always looking for ways to make sure that I am helping to take care of myself. I think for me, the latest way that I'm doing that is through my writing, right? I have my blog post, and those are great, and those are a great outlet. But I'm also trying to do bigger picture things, right? I kind of call it legal whack-a-mole. I think that you can become very frustrated when you only are dealing with that one case that pops up at a given time. Okay, whack it back down, get justice for that one person. Oh, 3 more pop up, right? And so I'm often telling folks that I really do want to teach my way out of a job, right? I feel very, and it probably sounds ironic, right? From someone who's got a private practice and who profits. I hate that I profit from the misery of vets, right? I hate it. But it's the fact of the matter is that there's a need for it. And so I started a nonprofit to try to train, coach, and mentor other defense counsel because I want to teach my way out of a job. I wrote a book for military counsel about how to write motions because I don't see that it's being taught at the JAG schools. I've got another book coming out about how to litigate motions. And I've got, plans for a series of books because, my colleagues, some of them who were more, I'm business oriented. I definitely am. I'm obviously running a business, but they'll say, Jocelyn, what are you doing? You're giving away your trade secrets. And my answer is that I want to. It's exactly what I want to do because not only it's just the right thing to do, but there's a need for it. And I am going to create greater change on behalf of service members by sharing that with others, not by keeping it, not by playing legal whack-a-mole. I want to make big change. I don't just want to help just the people I'm dealing with, but I want to train myself out of a job. As corny as that may sound, that really is where my energy is.
I applaud you. That's great. Because the more people you help to teach to do things, then you can help more vets. Because there's only one of you, right?
Exactly. And I put that pressure on myself, right? There's only one of me. There's only so many hours in a day. And I will exhaust myself if I just try to take on these cases. And so I take fewer cases. I really do. But I'm trying to make bigger change with the time that I have.
All right. So I'm going to ask a question I ask every time. And you can't say JAG. All right. What are you still using today that you learned in the military?
Oh my gosh, I use stuff all the time, every day, right? So it's funny because when I approach situations, I have sort of these, now I'm going to sound super cheesy, but like Lion King, Mufasa, like the voices of the past, right? Like the stars are shining down. Like there are so many people who influenced me when I was on active duty, judges, supervisors, mentors who have just these things that they said that stuck. Right. That's stuck in my brain. And so, I could list a bunch of those. In fact, one of them, several of them came from a retired military judge who I really look up to. And he is working now for the Army as a civilian. He retired as a lieutenant colonel, E.J. O'Brien. And he taught me so many things that I end up quoting him a lot in the books that I write and in the blog posts that I write, just about the various things that he said that have influenced me. And the one that I constantly repeat is, what's the therefore? What does that even mean, right? He would caution counsel and say, look, if you're going to be putting on a certain fact, you're going to be putting in certain evidence. I need you to be thinking past like just that moment, like, what is it that you want me to draw from it? And the example he was giving us in that moment in time was about, I think it was a sentencing phase where someone was having to face, some consequences for a guilty finding. And he said, when you spend all this time talking and you're telling their story and you're talking about like how awful their upbringing was, or, they didn't have a dad in their life, like whatever their story is that's leading, you need to ask yourself, what's the therefore? Is this person so harmed and so constrained by the way that they were raised that now they can't be a productive member of society? Is that where you want me to go? Right. And so always to be asking yourself, what's the therefore? What is it that you want me to conclude from that? And to be intentional, right? I'm constantly reminding counsel and myself, have a reason for what I'm doing, set an intention, make sure that you have an actual reason and you're not just doing it because you think, oh, well, this is a part of the story. And so therefore, it needs to come out. You have to always, always to be the writer, actor, director of your own one-person play is kind of how somebody's put it. To me, a very kind of infamous, famous director from Hollywood, Josh Carton, used to talk about that. And he's definitely been influential on my life and the way that I approach storytelling.
Amy? It's just so quiet. Did you have a long weekend? You tired there?
Well, no, I'm really enjoying listening.
Okay, then stay over there.
And I don't know, maybe in the Navy you didn't learn how to listen very well. This is how the Army listens. No, I'm playing.
Yeah. You mean you fell asleep? Anyway.
No,
I
I've
know,
been
Oh, gosh.
no, you're great. No, I always want to make sure I'm asking if there's anything she wants to ask, because, Amy's only been doing this for probably 4 episodes of our
Right,
podcast.
this
We
is
brought her
true.
in. That's why she's not on the film yet. We're getting there. She wasn't one of the originals. We brought her on. We always need additional people to help out, because our whole thing is this is a hub for veterans to find information, to get help, whatever that is. We have had people on here about PTSD. We have people about the VA claims. We talked about that. Now we have you on here talking about what you do. And so we always want people to be able to find it, because when you're looking for it, sometimes it's very difficult to find, right? But if there's a place they can go through, or they've seen it or heard it, we can help them get there. And that's what our plan is. So.
No, I commend you. That's great work that you're doing.
We're
I'm really
trying.
grateful for the chance to be here.
All right, so we talked about how you went, your service you joined, what you did in there, what you did when you got out, your transition story. Now, I want to ask a question. So you started a business, right? So a lot of people don't think law offices are a business, but they are, just like everything else. Just so you know, I own a mortgage company in California, so I own a business. Amy works for a business, does a ton of volunteering. She makes us feel bad how much she volunteers. We had to take her volunteer-holic off the name. It was making us feel so bad, because before she gets up in the morning, she's already volunteered 10 hours or so. She does more before 8 a.m. volunteering than we do all day long, right? Was that an Army thing?
That was way back in the day. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, watch it. So starting a business, because one of the things a lot of vets, when they get out, they start businesses. And we had a gentleman on, he was talking about how just because of, whether you're in combat or whatever, you have that knowledge, how to fight and open a business and do really well at it. Looking back, what would you wish you knew before you started your business? Going from here, if you look back, was there anything that the military should have helped you with? Is there anything else that, that other people, because one of the things I want to start for me being in business, I was a vet. I didn't really know. I didn't have my dad there, that he died of hairy cell leukemia from Agent Orange when I was 12. It didn't have those people. So I want to help put together a mentor program for vets who want to start businesses, so they can find out, either ask questions, other stuff. Because I do another podcast called Inner Edison, where we talk about our greatest defeats is usually our greatest accomplishments, right? Come out of that. And so looking back, is there anything that you wish you would have known before you started? Or would you have been too scared to start if you knew it?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think kind of what popped into my head when you were asking was honestly something that I think I personally struggled with. And hopefully I'm not the only person who struggled with it, but it's sort of understanding task and purpose. What are the things that I need to be doing in my business, but what are the things that I can be farming out, right? How can I be best utilizing the resources that are available to me at the right dialing rate, right? I about died on the hill of, I'm going to answer all my own calls, right? I'm going to be completely available to my clients. That was my initial approach to business. And I almost ran myself into the ground, as I'm sure you can imagine, trying to do everything. And so I think if I looked back on it, I wish that I would have had a better, and not to say that the resources aren't out there, but I wasn't looking for them. Right. And I think that was part of that's innate in me, is sort of that independence of, well, if you want something done right, you better do it yourself. Right. Part of it was that kind of stubbornness. But I think also was not realizing how to dial in the right resources at the right rate and the right level. Right. Because I've seen other people grow businesses so quickly that they didn't have as much of a need, right, where they were spending the dollars. My process in starting my business was very similar to how I was as a mom. I didn't want to be influenced that I needed all of these things and all of these gadgets and all of these fancy things that maybe I didn't really need, and maybe somebody was just trying to feed me a line of bologna, right, that I really needed this thing. And so, I came home and I had like my car carrier for my kid, and I'm like, okay, well, now there's a place I'd like to set him. Okay, so let me go get a little seat where I can set my kid. And that was kind of how I approached business, was that I was going to I ended up exhausting myself before I was willing to outsource and willing to bring on additional people who would be in a supportive role. Because I was also very, very, very hesitant and very nervous that by bringing other people into my business, I think it was twofold. Number one, can I trust this person who's going to do it the way that I would want it done? But also, is this now a person and a person's family who's going to be relying on me for their income? And I just don't know that emotionally I was ready to take that on. And so I think if I looked back on it, I wish I would have had a better insight into what I could bring in kind of slowly, rather than trying to more or less exhaust myself for the first 5 years of doing everything. Yeah, good question.
Thanks. I work on them. I'm just kidding. They just come to me when I'm talking. You know, I'm good at listening to you and picking things up, and I want to talk about those things. Amy, is there anything else you want to add today?
I did have another question. So you talked about kind of what you remember in the military or in the Army, and how you find balance. What do you do for fun? Like, what is just pure fun as a mom of 4?
She has 4 kids. What time does she have for fun?
Oh my gosh. This is probably the most terrifying question, right? I, in the last couple of years, have become really ingratiated into trash reality TV. And so one of the things that I do for myself is I don't work on Thursday. I'm not at work. Thursday is a day I take completely off, unless, of course, a judge tells me otherwise, right? But to the extent that I can, I schedule a court appearance, obviously if I'm in trial, I'm in trial. But otherwise, I don't work Thursdays. And I end up laying around and watching absolute trash, whether it's like Bachelor in Paradise, right? I'm talking like trash, like absolute mindless. What are these people up to that has nothing to do with my life, because it's just for that escape, right? Like and that was never how I was before. Like I didn't even have cable TV for about 10 years. I mean, people will reference a movie or a TV show. I'm like, I think I've heard of it, but no, I haven't seen that, right? Because I missed kind of a decade of life because I was working. I was just working and working and working and not taking any time to just put my brain in neutral, right? So I guess, although it's a little bit embarrassing, it really is kind of just trash TV and just vegging out and doing nothing.
You look shocked there, Amy. Is that what you do on Thursday too?
On Thursday? No, I have Helping the Brave at 3:30 on Thursday with you. Oh. No, I think Sundays for me, because I golf with my dad. Or what do you do, Ed, for fun?
I don't do anything for fun.
You have a lap dog that,
That's my wife's lap dog, as you can tell. It's a Rottweiler who thinks she's a lap dog. So.
Bigger than his wife. I think
she's 100 and something pounds. Yeah. She just climbs up, thinks she's a lap dog. But anyway, no, we spend a lot of time in our cabin and we spend a lot of time outside. I like to bike. I like to, cycle, not like, cruising. I'm talking like cycling, which is unique for somebody my size on a road bike. But yes, that's what I do.
See, we're all originals.
Yes.
I love to travel too. And when I do, I make it to where I'm not answering calls. I'm not, I took a trip. It was kind of the first time since the pandemic hit. And I took a trip to southern Utah and hiked and biked and just really just connected. And I remember I got a text message from a client on Easter Sunday saying, "Hey, do you have time for a call?" And that tug to want to be there for the person. And I had to respond and say, "It's Easter Sunday, man. I have an on-call attorney. He's waiting for your call. He'll connect with you tomorrow." And the client was fine with it, right? But really having to step away and unplug is a vital part of what I do, because it's grueling work. So
I understand totally. I mean, my work's not like that, but they still try to get a hold of me all the time. So, because there's so many, they have to have their information right now for that loan that's closing in 3 weeks,
Right. Well, I think
it's always something that could wait, but but you got to remember, just because they leave the message or they text you, it doesn't mean you have to respond. That's our innate in us who thinks, I got to get that off my plate in order for me to relax. I got to get rid of it, make sure it's gone, so I don't have anything to worry about. And I think a lot of that has to do with us, type 8 personalities, just learning how to deal with being okay with not getting to everything.
Right. Not right away. Exactly. And that was a lesson I had to learn, or I was just going to run myself into the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think learning boundaries is huge. I think almost no matter what you do, I just think, but I think it's like us as people get to this point because we don't realize we haven't set boundaries, or what somebody else's perception of what is okay. You know what I mean? Because you don't like, and here's your boundary. Nice to meet you. Step here, 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 and here, but not over there. And you're good. So, until it comes up, you don't know. And, but until you get to a certain age, you don't know how to necessarily set boundaries or why they're so important to your own ability to do more.
No, exactly.
It's like people think that it's to do less, but it's really to enable you to do more.
Absolutely. And I think in the last 6 months, we started a new even scheduling program because I was constantly bombarded, and understandably, right, with emails, text messages. Sometimes the text message followed up by an email, or an email followed up by a text message, because they want that information and they're experiencing anxiety. And so I was constantly putting out the fires and never getting ahead on anything else. And I said, I'm an efficiency person. I can't keep doing this. And so I found a system where current clients, they have the link and they know that they can get on my calendar, and then we'll have a set time and they can let me know what it is they want to talk about, or what it is they want to ask. And so we have a set time when we can do that. And it was a boundary I had to set. Right. And so I would still, I'd send out the email so that they would know, okay, this is how you can get me. And I'd still get kind of those text messages. And there was learning that took place, right? If I don't respond right away to that text, the next thing I know, when I do check email, I see that they scheduled. Yay. Because I set the boundary. First off, I needed to realize, right? I think that's a big part of what you're talking about, Amy, is kind of even realizing that what those boundaries need to be, right? Number one, that we need them, why they need to be there. And then sticking with them, right? That's the one I think that most people, myself included, have the hardest time for. That person is messaging me. They must, be right there, and they really have that need. And I was just, in fact, finishing up a blog post that I need to get out, but it's because somebody, two of the people who have kind of recently started for the firm said, we're feeling like we don't necessarily have that balance, kind of, and saying, hey, we feel like you have a pretty good balance. Like, is there advice you can give us? And one of them is, I expect you to ignore that repeated calls. And you're like, well, that just seems counterintuitive, right? Like, if I'm, quote, the boss, don't I want everybody hopping to each and every time? And the answer is no, because they're not going to be at their best. I'm not going to be focused on the task that I'm doing if I'm constantly having, barrage of questions and inquiries, and understanding that anxiety is completely normal and absolutely appropriate. I tell them there really aren't legal emergencies. There really aren't, right? Even the cops like banging on your door with a warrant is not an emergency. I mean, I'd like to hear from you. That's the kind of thing, like, shoot me a text. I want to know that. But other than that, we can deal with it. We can absolutely deal with it. And again, the big asterisk being behavioral health, crises. That's something is really near and dear to me. I lost a client who had been fully acquitted of his crime a year before, and I lost him to veteran suicide. So I don't mean to make light at all, but these boundaries are still important. And I wish, to God, that he had reached out to me, because maybe I could have been a voice to reground him and keep him with us. So I don't mean to imply at all that there's not bona fide crises, especially for folks who are the kind of people that I'm helping, right? Those crises of conscience are there. But for me to be at my best, for all the people that are counting on me, I have to set and to keep those boundaries, for sure.
And people know you have a bunch of people on your staff that support you, that if they need somebody right away, they can get a hold of somebody.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not going to be you. It doesn't have to be you. I have 4 people that support me. That doesn't mean my clients get to talk to me all the time. you know, in the beginning, because that's at the end, definitely, and throughout, whenever. But most of the time, they can deal with one of my people who is the specialist for that part of what they're doing through their transaction. So I think it's important for them to set, just like Amy said, set boundaries, let them know, set expectations, set everything up front so they know how to handle it. And I didn't take it like you were saying, you know, there wasn't emergencies. We understood that you can't be there for everybody at the same time all the time. There just won't be anything left.
Right. And I think it took me, you know, almost burning out, I think, to really realize that. And I've had colleagues who, you know, have gone to inpatient behavioral health because they run themselves so ragged that they try to be all things to all people. And you just can't, because you end up putting yourself last. And I'm grateful, though, to the folks who see that, recognize it, and say, you know, keep at it. We want you to do it. Take your vacations, take your Thursday, you know, whatever it is that's going to keep you in the fight, because we want and we need you on our side.
You know, Jocelyn, it's really great to get to know you today. We appreciate you being on here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Amy, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, but I just think we should go out and get a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever you like, since we're close to each other.
Absolutely. Please. Yeah.
All right. We're going to get off here, but don't go anywhere, Jocelyn. Stay there. All right. Again, thank you so much for being on here today. Thank you for everybody who was watching, listening. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. And again, Jocelyn, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Amy, you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye. Thank you.
Wow. All right. I'm going to end it.